Thank you very much. I'm speaking Zazaki right now, but I will speak in Turkish later. And I would like to thank everyone and who organized this event. For me, it's an historical meeting today, because I wish I could made my entire speech in Zazaki Kurdish, but I know that not everyone is understanding Zazaki, so I will continue in Turkish. And I would like to thank you for the invitation and for this historic gathering here. So, when I'm doing my presentation, I will stick with the curriculum. They gave me a topic, and I will stick with that topic. And they asked me to talk about 2013, 2015, but with the limited time that I have, it's really difficult to tell you about that process. But as I said, with a systematic, I will try to give you a summary and give you a systematic overview to the process, and at the end I will also share my personal ideas. In order to understand 2013-2015 process is important in order to understand the current process. So therefore they asked me to make a comparison between the previous process and now. I think also it's very important, and we all know the peace process or the solution process. Back then, the process was before the end. We had a very successful process, and before we reached the end, it was the phase that there will be a delegation of monitoring or observing. That was the last point that we had to decide, but then it failed. So, which means that we could have done it 10 years ago. We were at the point of finding a solution, but we saw that the Turkish government, that they failed the process, and we missed this historic opportunity. And then there was war. We know that there was also oppression against the political sphere, political parties. There were massacres like Roboski, but like before, while there was so violence and the war going on, there was a process that started even before the ones that made public. So we know in December 2012, we became aware of some public statements, and then Erdogan delivered a speech on the state channel TRT. He admitted that there are some visits and talks with Öcalan, and he admitted the peace process was in motion. So if you might remember, a week later, after Erdogan's speech on the 3rd of January, the first delegation went to Imrali Island in 2013. Ahmet Türk, Aylat Aka, and there was another person that was the delegation. Altan Tan, Pervin is. She corrected me. Altan Tan was not a part of the first delegation. It might be a mistake. But as I said, there was the first delegation went to the island a week after Erdogan's speech on the state channel. And we brought Öcalan's message, and then we shared it with the public. After the first meeting on the 9th of January, 3 Kurdish women activists were killed, assassinated in Paris. Leyla Şailemez and 2 other women. And this was a topic that mentioned in our meetings very often. And Öcalan said that I see no difference that they kill Sakine in Paris or they kill me here in the prison. There is no difference. So he said it was an updated Dersim massacre. That's how he defined these assassinations of the Kurdish women in Paris. But he also said the purpose of these assassinations are bringing an end to the peace process. So we cannot let it happen, and our response to this assassination will be insisting on peace, but they will pay for this assassination in future. What it means, I will try to explain it in details later, but after the massacre in Paris, there were some concerns whether the process will continue or not. It was not only Öcalan's concern or thinking, but when the bodies of 3 women were sent to Diyarbakir, and at the funeral there were like hundreds of thousands of people were present. So these people, they said, we own this process. So they showed their support for the process, that it should continue. So that's how the process continued. And after the tensions, Öcalan, as a key opening all these the tensions or solving these discussions, Öcalan prepared a call for peace, and he said a peace will not only be good for the Turkish or Kurdish people, but it is also good for the entire region back then. In 2013 at the Nowruz speech, and then we informed the public opinion about the steps that need to be taken. But unfortunately, there was some kind of a vague response from the Turkish state with regard to the necessary steps, what we also face today. But despite all these handicaps, we wanted to socialize this process, and the government was also they also agreed that we started having the commissions of wise men, and they were trying to going to the public, visiting the families who lost their beloved ones in the conflict, and they were talking about the peace and talking process. And at the beginning there was a resistance against it, but later at the Turkish National Assembly there was a commission was established in the parliament, and if you might remember, CHP and MHP back then, they didn't send any representatives to this committee. That was their response to this peace process. But with the time, Mr. Öcalan, that he always he was insisting on legal grounds that he was also mentioning back then, and it was very limited legal changes made at the parliament, and there were these wise men commissions, and there was also some work to have a framework piece of legislation with regard to peace process, but it wasn't fulfilled, and the government delayed it, stalled it, and then it brought many more problems later. So today, the perspective proposed by Mr. Öcalan it's so wide that even includes the process of 2013-25. But in the face of Öcalan's call, the steps taken by the government, they are very much behind of this call. There is not a commission yet. There is not the civil society being a part of this process, and there is no work to have a legal ground or legal basis for this process. There is no legislation, no amendments, no new law. If it is the approach, if it continues, this process cannot be developed or unilaterally. There should be. That's what we learned from the previous process. That was a unilateral. Efforts are not enough. You cannot develop a peace process unilaterally. It should be bilateral. There should be steps taken by both parties, and in May 2013, there was a call for the guerrilla to withdraw from Turkey, and following that, as the response, there were some democratic steps were supposed to be taken by the Turkish government, but the legal arrangements were not fulfilled as a response to the withdrawal of the guerrilla. In contrary, in a time of expectations of legal arrangements, the Turkish state started building new military bases in Kurdistan, and they introduced more village guards at the time, and there were also military operations, like provocative military operations continued at the time when the guerrilla was withdrawing from Turkey. So, and Turkey went beyond its border and supported these mobster and the armed groups who were fighting against the Kurds in Syria. Turkey started supporting them at the same time. In June, there was these Gezi protests, and after the Gezi protests, they changed their direction and they went to the direction of totalitarianism. And we saw a government, a state that want to oppress every opposition in the country. So these it made it clear that unilateral efforts of Öcalan that he created with this historical and social background, but because of these unilateral efforts, that the process failed. And even back then, the only thing that were making the process continue were the statements came from Öcalan. In 2014, in the face of that frustration, Öcalan sent one single Nowruz message, and it revived all the hopes and brought enthusiasm to the people. And in his message of Nowruz, Öcalan was calling upon the government for some steps, and he said, if they fail to do so, there will be like a coup d'état against the system in Turkey. That was his warning, and the history proved that. In 2015, we saw the coup d'état that took place in Turkey. So we can say his evaluations, his analysis are so strong and very effective in that sense. So he knows Turkey, he knows the politics. He had also other warnings towards the Kurds, to the Turks, and they were ignored by the state and the government. And there were also some other interventions from Turkey or provocation against the process that were not taken seriously by the government, but we saw that how they damaged the process. The stance of the back then, we remember everything. There was a turning point when Erdogan made a speech about Kobani, but at the time of the resistance in Kobani, Erdogan made a speech that Kobani is about to fall. So that was the turning point in that process, because Kobani was not only important only for the Kurds, but it was actually a symbol for everyone fighting against ISIS. And in October 2014, Erdogan started a new process of destruction, and they targeted the Kurds. So because the state failed to understand or to evaluate the relationship between the Turks and the Kurds, instead of improving their relationship with the Kurds in Syria, they supported the barbarism, they support the ISIS and the Islamist fundamentalists, and the process failed. And they couldn't continue the process.
İlgili bir karar alındığında dahi gerek Sayın Öcalan,
even the state took a decision for destruction, and despite the decision taken by the state, Öcalan insisted on peace, and the Kurdish movement was also supporting the efforts for peace, despite the fact that the government was planning a total destruction in Kurdistan. And months later, 28th of February 2015, we had this picture at the Dolmabahce consensus. The content of the consensus of Dolmabahce Palace, it was like today, it was peace and democratic society. So we can say it was more or less the same content that in Öcalan's call. So Öcalan was talking about the minimum Öcalan was talking about improving the political fight, political struggle, and Öcalan was talking about making a call to the PKK for laying down. That was coming from this consensus. But what I want to say, because of the foreign policy of Turkey against the Syrian Kurds, that was based on hostility, but also inside Turkey, this politics that's only aiming at winning elections in Turkey. These were the reasons that failed the process. Because Erdogan saw that the peace was not useful for him, because he was losing votes, and those who were in favor of peace were gaining power. They were becoming strong. Therefore, they failed the process. So we saw that how AKP destroyed the negotiation table. And in the process of the elections, before the election, Erdogan made a statement that he doesn't recognize this Dolmabahce consensus, that it was a wrong picture, and he only said such a consensus will only give Öcalan legitimacy, which he doesn't want. Then, even back then, he gave the signals that what they were planning. And after the 7th of June, the elections, we saw the results. The HDP party got 13 and it became the third biggest party in the Turkish parliament. And so also it brought so many Turkish leftist revolutionaries were also joined the party, and Erdogan lost the majority. Therefore, from 7th of June until the 1st of October, the renewal of the elections, we saw what happened. That the massacre in Suruç took place, and then 2 Turkish police officers were assassinated on very suspicious conditions, unclarified. So these were the steps going towards the war. That's how that brought an end to this process, which also brought destructive results. We saw that 10 years of destruction. And meanwhile, there were some operations, purge against the Kurdish politicians, also elected mayors and co-mayors, and thousands of Kurdish politicians were arrested, sent to prison. The municipalities were confiscated, and the mayors were replaced with the trustees assigned by the Ministry of Interior. So we saw and today we see that all these practices that the Turkish government used against the Kurds back then now equally implemented beyond the west of the Euphrates. Now the Turkish municipalities are suffering the same. And in a period that nobody was thinking of peace, nobody was even thinking of peace, but Kurdish leader Abdullah Öcalan, with the messages he sent, now his messages let the seeds of hope to raise, to get stronger. The hopes are getting stronger because of the Öcalan's messages. So, shortly, if I may say, in the previous process, there was a process that was recognized by the government, by the state. And with time, there were the wise men commissions, a commission at the parliament, and there was a piece of legislation, although it was very limited, very small, mere symbolic, but it was something that would convince the society. There are some concrete steps. But today, we don't even see those limited steps were taken back then. Even when they are naming this process, they never consider any sensibilities of the Kurdish side. And they want to launch, even in the public opinion, they want to show it that the initiative is in the hands of the government. There is no civil society. There is no inclusion of the society or the different parties in the process, and they never talk about the peace or the social aspects. They only talk about the security and the war and military aspect of this process. So they reduce it to security policies. So, but despite everything, Mr. Öcalan continues his stance for peace, and once again, with his all intellectual ideas, he brings a proposal for peace, and then it also entrusts us with this proposal. It's our also task. It's not that he will do everything, but he's giving us tasks. He's sharing this peace process with us. and he includes us in this process. Despite all the attitude from the state, Mr. Öcalan philosophically he said every war has a peace. Those who know how to fight, they should also know how to make peace. Because if those who do not know how to make peace cannot even have a proper war. It becomes a dirty war. It becomes a catastrophe. And he said, even if I will be executed tomorrow, I will continue working for peace. Because making peace is an art. And making peace is even harder than continuing the war. So in the background of his call, there is this philosophical and humanitarian approach behind his call for peace. And even today, as it was summarized by our colleagues, so he is isolated from the rest of the world, living on an island, surrounded by water, behind the iron doors in a small cell. He is still insisting on the peace because Öcalan has these philosophical pillars, philosophical ground for his call for peace. So, and with this attitude, Öcalan is actually exceeding his personality as a leader of Kurdish people, and he is reaching out the world. Now we see a real perspective of peace. In a period of time that nobody was talking about peace, Öcalan is taking the great risks by talking about peace. But Öcalan has the power to revive all these hopes for peace with one sentence. He can make it. And so to make peace, Öcalan, it requires cultural, historical, philosophical background, and with his attitude he proves that he has all these necessary pillars for this. So it is not only, this process is not only about the Kurds, it's not only about the freedom of the Kurds, but it is beyond that. In the history, Öcalan started as a guerrilla leader, and then he became a leader of the Kurdish people, and today he goes beyond being a Kurdish leader. And now he is, and today we see that the people in the Middle East said, no, Öcalan cannot only be defined as the Kurdish leader of the Kurdish people, we also recognize him as our leader. So Öcalan becomes a leader, a leader for the peoples of the Middle East. He's welcomed, recognized, and accepted by the people in the Middle East with his perspective for peace. So he is a wise person, and wise person working for peace. So he became a peace leader. So because he became a peace leader, when we talk about his conditions or when we talk about the Kurdish people, it cannot only be reduced to the Kurdish people. It's more about making peace and giving freedom to a peacemaker. So Nelson Mandela's freedom was not his personal individual freedom. When we talk about the freedom of Nelson Mandela, it's not only about a freedom of an individual. It's freedom of Mandela. We also talk about the liberation of the people of South Africa who suffered under apartheid of the black people of the continent. That's why we talk about the freedom of Mandela. And beyond that, and not only about the black people in South Africa, freedom of Mandela also brought inspiration for everyone in the world who were suffering under oppression. So freedom of Mandela means also freedom of all the oppressed people around the world. In that sense, freedom of Öcalan himself is not his individual freedom. It's not only the freedom of Kurdish people or the people in the Middle East, but also his freedom is freedom of those people who are fighting for peace and for justice. And once again, and I see that those people who are supporting this campaign, supporting the Kurdish people, they are not only supporting Mr. Öcalan or supporting the Kurdish people, they are supporting the values of humanity. Therefore, I would like to thank you and salute you. As Öcalan says, the truth is the love, and the love is the free life. So I would like to salute everyone who brings peace and the free life together with Öcalan. Once again, thank you.